You won't believe what happened after the HOA bulldozed my cousin's home for their new project, only to realize he was a U.S. Army general. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing you amazing stories like this one. The story begins with the Homeowners Association, HOA, announcing a new development project in the community, which they call the future of Willow Creek. This ambitious project aims to revitalize the area with modern amenities, including a high-end shopping plaza, an expansive park, and state-of-the-art recreational facilities. The HOA presents it as a fantastic opportunity for the neighborhood, promising new jobs, improved infrastructure, and increased property values. But what they don't mention is that, in order to make room for this development, several homes will be demolished. The residents are told that the HOA has been working on this plan for months, and the project is already set in motion. However, the HOA has not thoroughly communicated with the homeowners, choosing to send generic letters about the project instead of engaging in proper dialogue with the affected families. Among the homes that the HOA wants to acquire is that of the protagonist's cousin, General Jack Montgomery, a man who seems to be a quiet, regular member of the community. Jack has lived in Willow Creek for many years, maintaining a modest but well-kept home with his wife, Sarah Montgomery, and their two children, Emily and Nathan. He's known for being a private man who enjoys his peace and avoids drawing attention to himself. However, what the HOA does not know is that he is a retired U.S. Army general with an extensive military background, someone whose reputation commands respect and influence. But that aspect of his life is not immediately apparent to the members of the HOA, and they see him as just another homeowner whose property can be used to facilitate their community improvement plans. The HOA begins to send out notices to the residents whose homes will be demolished, offering them compensation for relocation. However, these letters are impersonal and fail to capture the gravity of the situation. The homeowners are given a monetary offer to leave their properties, and the HOA assures them that everything will be taken care of. Yet, no one is informed about the true impact of the project, and many feel that the HOA is treating them like mere obstacles to be removed. Most of the homeowners, especially those who have lived in the neighborhood for decades, are furious but don't know how to properly fight the HOA's decision. Many are unsure about their legal rights and are pressured into accepting the offers. Jack, being away on an extended military-related trip, is completely unaware of the developments. He's gone for several months, focused on personal matters, and unaware of the ongoing planning that is taking place. The HOA, assuming that he is just another absentee homeowner who won't mind the decision, proceeds with the plans to bulldoze his home without any personal contact. The HOA does not even attempt to reach out to any of the neighbors who might be more familiar with Jack's background. They simply assume that, like other properties, this one is expendable for the sake of progress. As the HOA presses forward with their development plans, demolition crews begin arriving in the neighborhood, equipped with bulldozers, wrecking balls, and other heavy machinery. These crews start to tear down houses, one by one, with little regard for the personal stories and histories tied to each property. The community is divided, with some residents supporting the HOA's vision for the future, while others vehemently oppose the decision. Some of the homeowners whose houses are being demolished are angry, but they're too intimidated by the HOA's power to do anything about it. The HOA paints the project as an upgrade for the neighborhood, a necessity to make the area competitive with other nearby regions. But many feel that their homes are being torn down to make way for corporate greed. Jack's home is chosen simply due to its location and size, which are ideal for the HOA's new plans. The house is large enough to accommodate the new park's infrastructure, and the land is prime real estate. However, the HOA has no knowledge of the history behind the home. The house was a gift to Jack from his late father, a legacy that Jack holds dear. He has memories of growing up there and later raising his own children. The house holds immense sentimental value, but the HOA doesn't care about that. They see it only as a structure to be replaced in the name of progress. While the demolition is underway, Jack is returning home from his extended trip, unaware of the chaos that has unfolded in his absence. He had always been a man who focused on the larger picture of his military career, often leaving behind the small day-to-day details of civilian life. But when he arrives and sees the massive destruction happening in his yard, he is immediately taken aback. His house, his family's home, is being leveled by bulldozers. Jack tries to understand what is happening, rushing to the scene where he confronts the construction crew. They inform him that they've been instructed by the HOA to demolish the property, but they are unsure why. They simply follow orders. Jack, realizing that this is more than just an accidental mistake, begins to ask more pointed questions. He calls the HOA to demand an explanation. At first, the HOA staff respond with confusion, as they hadn't been informed of any special circumstances surrounding the property. They offer standard explanations about the development plan and try to dismiss his concerns. They believe that Jack is simply another homeowner who doesn't fully understand the grand vision for the neighborhood. But when Jack mentions his military rank, his retired title as a U.S. Army general, the conversation shifts dramatically. The HOA staff, who had previously been dismissive, begin to scramble for answers. The general's military background and his rank are not widely known outside of a certain circle. But once the HOA representatives realize who they're dealing with, they quickly shift from casual indifference to nervousness. Jack doesn't immediately explode in anger or violence, but rather takes a calm, calculated approach, using the same discipline he applied in the military to manage the situation. He contacts legal advisors and military contacts, preparing for the battle ahead. The HOA, completely unaware of the firestorm they've just unleashed, believes they can simply smooth things over with a small apology and an offer of more compensation. But they have severely underestimated the reach and influence of the general. Meanwhile, Jack's family is in an emotional state, torn between outrage and disbelief. His wife, Sarah, is devastated by the sight of their home being destroyed. Their children, Emily and Nathan, are equally heartbroken, feeling as though a part of their childhood is being erased. Jack, who had spent his life protecting and serving his country, is now forced to fight a battle against a corporation that sees no value in the legacy of his home. As news of the destruction spreads throughout the community, other residents begin to rally behind Jack. They too have seen their homes threatened, and many of them, even if they don't fully understand Jack's past, realize that this is a fight worth joining. The HOA's plan, which they believed was a simple solution to neighborhood redevelopment, quickly begins to unravel. What the HOA didn't expect, and what they couldn't have anticipated, was the deep well of influence that Jack has, both in military circles and among influential community leaders. Jack's reputation isn't something that can be easily ignored or brushed aside. And as his response to the bulldozing grows more public, the HOA finds itself in an increasingly difficult position. The consequences of their mistake begin to unfold, and they soon realize that they may have taken on more than they bargained for. After the initial shock of discovering his home being demolished, General Jack Montgomery takes a step back to assess the situation. He is a man of discipline, having spent decades in the U.S. Army, and his response to this invasion of his personal life is neither impulsive nor emotionally driven. Instead, he draws on the military strategies that have served him well throughout his career: patience, foresight, and calculated precision. His first priority is to stop the demolition of his family's home, but he knows this won't be an easy task, as the HOA has already mobilized significant resources to push their project forward. Jack begins by calling the HOA office directly. His tone is calm but firm as he introduces himself. "This is General Jack Montgomery," he says, his voice carrying the weight of his rank and experience. The receptionist at the HOA office is taken aback. She's accustomed to dealing with regular homeowners who are upset but have no real leverage or authority. However, when she hears the name General Montgomery, she recognizes that she's no longer speaking to just another disgruntled resident. She immediately transfers him to Susan Adams, the project manager for the HOA's redevelopment project. Susan Adams, a relatively new hire at the HOA, had been tasked with overseeing the development plans for Willow Creek. She's young, ambitious, and eager to make a name for herself in the community. Her role in pushing the project forward had made her something of a local hero in the HOA circles, as the new development was marketed as a much-needed upgrade for the neighborhood. She was quick to disregard any objections from residents, assuming that people would eventually adapt to the idea once they saw the larger benefits of the project. However, when she picks up the phone and hears General Montgomery's voice, she is immediately on edge. "General Montgomery," Susan says, her tone polite but clearly nervous, "I understand you have concerns about the demolition of your property. However, I must inform you that this is part of the HOA's revitalization project, which has been approved by the majority of the community. I'm afraid your home was selected as part of the necessary changes for the greater good of Willow Creek." Jack listens carefully, but he doesn't immediately respond to her justification. He can sense the dismissal in her voice, and it only strengthens his resolve. He knows that he needs more than just a conversation with an HOA employee. He needs a formal response and action. After a few moments of silence, he speaks, his voice steady. "I am well aware of your so-called greater good, Susan," he replies. "What I'm asking for is a full cessation of any demolition activity on my property until this matter is resolved. I will be arriving at the HOA office to discuss this further. I expect full cooperation." Jack's decision to confront the HOA in person is calculated. He knows that in a battle of bureaucratic procedures, the odds are often stacked against individuals. But he has a unique advantage: his connections, both within the military and in the wider community, which could quickly become a powerful tool in his fight. He doesn't just represent himself. He represents the many other homeowners who are silently suffering under the HOA's decision. The bulldozing of his home is a symbol of a larger problem, and Jack is determined to expose it. After hanging up, Jack calls his wife, Sarah Montgomery, to inform her of the situation. Sarah, though initially in shock, quickly pulls herself together. She is no stranger to the sacrifices Jack has made for his country, and she knows that when Jack is focused on something, there's no stopping him. "I'll meet you at the HOA office," she says firmly. "Let's make sure they understand the consequences of their actions." Together, they make their way to the HOA office, which is housed in a sleek, modern building located at the edge of Willow Creek. As they arrive, they notice several cars parked outside, including some belonging to other homeowners who have expressed their concerns but had not yet taken action. Sarah, seeing the growing crowd of disgruntled residents, realizes that this is no longer just about their home. It's about standing up for the entire community. Once inside the office, Jack and Sarah are directed to a waiting room, where they sit alongside a few other residents who have been affected by the development project. Some are elderly couples who have lived in the neighborhood for decades. Others are young families just starting to settle in. All of them share the same frustration with the HOA and the sudden, unconsulted changes being forced upon them. Jack, noticing the quiet discontent among the group, speaks to them, introducing himself as the general whose property is being destroyed. As he does, the atmosphere shifts. Many of the residents start to voice their own concerns, realizing that they are not alone in this fight. "I'm here because I believe we deserve more than just a check and a promise," Jack says to the group, his voice carrying authority. "We have a right to be heard, and we have a right to keep our homes. This project should not come at the expense of our lives. They can't bulldoze our memories without facing the consequences." His words resonate deeply with the others. They now realize that they're fighting for more than just property. They're fighting for the integrity of their community. As Jack waits, he contacts several of his former military colleagues who are now influential community leaders. One of them is Colonel David Harper, a retired officer who now serves as the head of a local veterans organization. Jack and David have known each other for years, and Jack knows that David has connections with local government officials. Within minutes, David is on the phone with a local councilman, urging him to look into the legality of the HOA's project. In the meantime, Jack receives a call from his attorney, Catherine Webb, who informs him that they have gathered the necessary legal documentation to challenge the HOA's actions. Catherine, a former military lawyer with whom Jack had worked closely during his service, is now one of the best civil litigation attorneys in the area. She assures Jack that they have a solid case for unlawful seizure of property and violation of homeowners' rights. Catherine's involvement sends a clear message to the HOA. This will not be an easy fight, and they're dealing with a man who knows how to navigate complex legal battles. Jack's next move is to take his case to the public. As a well-respected figure in the community, his voice carries weight, and he knows that if he can rally public support, the HOA will be forced to reconsider their approach. With the help of Catherine and a few local journalists, a press release is drafted detailing the unfair treatment of homeowners and the destruction of Jack's property. The story quickly spreads through local news channels, social media platforms, and community forums, creating a groundswell of support. Jack's military background adds to his credibility, and the story of the bulldozed general strikes a chord with the public. People begin to question the ethics of the HOA's actions, and several local businesses offer to help those affected by the development project. At the HOA office, Susan Adams, who had previously been dismissive of Jack's concerns, begins to feel the pressure. She receives calls from concerned community members, and her inbox fills with emails from people urging her to stop the demolition and reconsider the project. The pressure is mounting, and she begins to realize that she is in way over her head. The community's backlash is growing louder by the minute, and it seems that the HOA may have severely misjudged the situation. As the day progresses, Jack's influence becomes more apparent. With the support of his community, his military colleagues, and his legal team, the tide begins to turn against the HOA. The once unstoppable project now faces a significant roadblock, one that will test the HOA's resolve and its ability to respond to the growing unrest. And as Jack prepares for the next phase of his fight, he knows that this battle is far from over. The HOA might have bulldozed his home, but they haven't yet bulldozed his spirit. The pressure that General Jack Montgomery and the residents of Willow Creek have placed on the Homeowners Association, HOA, is beginning to show results. As the media coverage grows and local businesses, community leaders, and even politicians voice their support for Jack, the HOA starts to feel the weight of the backlash. What initially seemed like a minor inconvenience to the HOA, residents protesting their project, has evolved into a full-blown public relations crisis. Their once unquestioned control over the neighborhood is now being challenged by a powerful force, the collective will of the community, galvanized by Jack's leadership. The press coverage of Jack's legal challenges, combined with the efforts of his attorney Catherine Webb, has turned the HOA's redevelopment project into a local controversy. News outlets quickly pick up on the story of the bulldozed general, and the public is outraged that the HOA would proceed with such drastic measures without considering the opinions of the homeowners. Jack's background in the military and his reputation as a man of principle make him a sympathetic figure, and his fight for the community has inspired others to stand with him. Under increasing public pressure, the HOA's leadership decides to hold an emergency meeting. Susan Adams, the project manager, faces her first real challenge as the face of the development. She had been confident that the community would eventually accept the changes, but now the situation is spiraling out of control. Board members are divided, with some still insisting that the project must continue, while others are increasingly worried about the public backlash and the legal threats mounting against them. Susan stands in front of the board, trying to maintain her composure. We've already invested significant funds into this project. We can't just back out now, she says, attempting to defend the HOA's position. We have the legal right to proceed, and the general's complaints are just one loud voice in a sea of support for this development. However, John Stevenson, a board member and former lawyer, counters her statement. Susan, this isn't just about legal rights anymore. It's about public perception. If we continue with this plan, we risk not only a prolonged legal battle, but also our reputation. The community is clearly against us, and we're facing more than just the general's opposition. People are rallying behind him. The room grows tense as more board members speak up, questioning whether the project is worth the risk of alienating the residents and facing further legal repercussions. Susan is forced to concede that the situation is more complicated than she originally thought. The HOA, which once believed it could push through the development with little resistance, now realizes it is at a crossroads. In the meantime, Jack is focused on the next steps in his battle. With the support of Catherine and his network of military contacts, Jack is preparing for a public hearing where he will present his case against the HOA. His legal team is working hard to gather evidence of the HOA's unlawful actions, and Jack's allies in the local government are already making noise about investigating the project. It's clear to Jack that this fight is bigger than his home. It's about defending the rights of every resident who is being ignored by the HOA's decision. On the day of the public hearing, the atmosphere in the town hall is charged with tension. The room is filled with residents, reporters, and even some local politicians. Many of the residents are elderly or young families who have lived in Willow Creek for years. They've watched their community grow and change, but never in such an aggressive and dismissive way. Jack stands tall at the front, his military bearing evident as he prepares to speak. Susan begins the meeting by outlining the HOA's position. She talks about the supposed benefits of the redevelopment project, new amenities, improved property values, and the promise of economic growth. "We believe this project will revitalize Willow Creek," she says. "This is an opportunity for the community to evolve and prosper." But Jack is ready. He rises to his feet, his voice steady but firm. "I've spent my life defending my country, defending the rights of people who didn't always have a voice," Jack says, addressing the room. "And I'm here today to defend the rights of the people in this community. What the HOA is doing is not progress, it's destruction. You cannot bulldoze homes and memories for a project that disregards the people who built this place." His words strike a chord with the crowd. There's an air of disbelief among the residents that the HOA would take such a unilateral approach, and Jack's speech gives them the courage to speak out. The room erupts into applause as Jack continues, outlining how the project has been pushed forward without adequate consultation, compensation, or consideration for the lives of the residents. "This is about more than a house," Jack says, his voice rising. "It's about our right to be heard, our right to live in a community that values our voices and our contributions. This project has been imposed on us without consent, and that's not how things are supposed to work in this country. I won't stand by and let this happen." The crowd responds with more applause, and the HOA members start to look uncomfortable. Susan, who had once dismissed Jack's concerns as an isolated issue, now realizes that the tide has turned. The room is no longer on her side, and she sees the writing on the wall. The pressure from the community is overwhelming, and she knows that the HOA cannot afford to continue with the project as it is. As the hearing continues, more residents speak out, voicing their opposition to the project. By the time the meeting ends, it is clear that the HOA has lost the support of the majority of the community. The board members, faced with the public outcry and the legal threats, decide to suspend all demolition activities and enter into negotiations with the residents. For Jack, this is a victory, but he knows that it is not the end of the fight. The HOA may have paused the project, but Jack remains vigilant. He continues to work with his legal team and his allies in the community to ensure that the rights of homeowners are protected. Jack's battle has shown the residents of Willow Creek that they have the power to stand up to injustice, and his leadership has united them in a way they hadn't thought possible. As Jack leaves the town hall with his family, he knows that the fight for his home is over, for now. But he has shown the community that their voices matter, and they will not be silenced.